Recently, I was at a protest outside Parliament in the UK, and the police didn't shoot anybody. In fact, I've been to dozens, maybe even hundreds of protests around the UK and never heard of the police shooting anybody. So when Westerners like me read that 17 Gazans were shot by the Israeli security forces at a protest on the Israel-Gaza border, it feels like a disproportionate response, grossly disproportionate. But we're guilty, us in the West, of viewing the world from our ivory towers in the West. You see, Gaza isn't London. The UK doesn't face an existential threat. Last week, when I was at the protest, it was against anti-Semitism. None of the protesters had carried out armed strikes against the British government. None of the protesters were armed and intent on killing police officers. It's so easy for me to assume that the protesters in Gaza are the same as the protesters in the UK, but they're not. Of the 17 Gazans that were killed, 11 of them, that's 2/3, are known members of proscribed terror groups like Hamas and Islamic Jihad. As it stands, all of those that were killed were men of fighting age. Some of them were even killed in gunfights with the Israeli security forces. The media has charged Israel with attacking a peaceful protest. But is this really comparable to the peaceful demonstrations we're used to in the West? Is this even a fair charge? Some outlets have even turned this into an anti-Semitic libel, drawing on the medieval trope that Jews murder non-Jews on Passover. As a number of Gazans were killed or injured, Israel will and it must treat the situation seriously. But who should we hold accountable for these deaths? Israel? Hamas? With militants and civilians charging the border together during this Hamas organised and choreographed protest, Israel felt that it was forced to use live ammunition. Questions must be asked. What was Hamas doing, hiding militants amongst the civilian protest? Why were they encouraging these groups to breach the fence? And then if they had breached the fence, what would these militants have done once inside Israel? Because the Israeli Defense Forces used live ammunition, there will be a thorough investigation into each instance. And if any soldiers are found to have broken protocol, they will and should feel the full force of the law. Now, while Hamas may not have pulled the trigger, we're under no illusion that they intended for blood to be spilled on Friday, Palestinian and Israeli. They organised their protests so that more Palestinians would be martyred and more Israelis murdered. The one positive sign from this weekend's unfortunate events was the scale. Hamas promised huge protests, but only 17,000 people took part. Hopefully, this is because the people of Gaza are tiring of Hamas's tyrannical reign and they're ready for change. Maybe they prefer a party that's committed to advancing the quality of life in Gaza rather than diverting its resources in desperate pursuit of the annihilation of Israel. Enough parents have lost children to this conflict on both sides of the fence. The violence must stop. For more videos like this, subscribe to the Israel Advocacy Movement on YouTube and follow us on Facebook and Twitter.